Remember, you're here to enjoy your wife in a new light. You're here to experience something with her. It's not about making her do something, or if she doesn't perform in some way, it's not a reflection of her or you.
You're listening to Get Your Marriage On, the fun and spicy podcast bringing you new tools and fresh ideas so that you can be the sexiest couple you know.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Get Your Marriage On. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, and I am so glad you're here. This episode's going to be a little more explicit than our usual episodes, but I think that's okay. Today we get to talk about squirting and female ejaculation, which has a lot of interest thanks to the internet, but it's also an amazing experience that couples can enjoy together and attests to God's grand design in our bodies. And I love it because it adds more layers of mystery and fun to your sexual experience, reinforcing the idea that you can know someone and be married to them such a long time and yet discover new things about each other that are both very erotic and sexual and can be really bonding. Before we get into that, thank you to everyone that's participating in our 14 Days of Sextimacy Challenge that's going on right now in the Intimately Us app. We're so excited. For these 14 days leading up to Valentine's Day, couples all around the world are completing little challenges every day to strengthen their marriage and being a little more intentional. And you're earning points to earn some pretty fantastic prizes. Towards the end of this month, I will be opening the doors again to my coaching program, Next Level. This is a great opportunity for you and your spouse to work with me. It's really affordable. It's designed for busy couples on the go, and it's a way for you to apply the principles that we talk about on this podcast into your marriage so you can have more closeness, fun, and, better intimacy in your marriage. And thank you to all those that have registered and signed up for our upcoming retreat. We have sold out. We're so excited for the couples that are coming. We're going to have such an amazing experience. If you'd like to get on the wait list for future retreats, come onto our website, click on Couples Retreat, and go ahead and fill out that form. A few years ago, my wife and I were driving through Zion National Park on our way to a romantic getaway. We were so excited to spend a weekend together. We found a babysitter to watch our kids, and we're looking forward to just some quiet and some fun together. On the way, we were listening to a podcast episode together from Sexy Marriage Radio that talked about squirting and female ejaculation. And we were both very skeptical. It's like, what? Women ejaculate? That's like the weirdest thing. Because it was so foreign to us to hear this concept. Anyway, we decided to incorporate some of the suggestions that that particular episode was offering. And, well, let's just say we had a pretty amazing experience trying something new that weekend. My wife and I are the creators of the Intimately Us app, and in that app we have a section called How-Tos, and we wrote a detailed, in-depth guide on how to squirt for our users that might be interested in learning how to do this or put it in practice in their marriage. A little while ago, I got this review on the Apple App Store for the Intimately Us app, and I love what she said. She said, "I got this app to see if it would be helpful to recommend to my newlywed friend. But as I started to explore the app, I learned about things I didn't know in my 3 years of sex with my husband. The day I got the app, we tried making me squirt for the first time, and it worked. I'm so impressed by how they explain everything in detail." So yeah, it can be a pretty exciting experience if this is something new that you want to try. So you might be wondering, what is squirting? Squirting is used to describe female ejaculation. This is when your vulva emits liquid from the urethra in response to sexual stimulation or orgasm. Squirting is different than vaginal lubrication alone. The fluid released is usually watery and gushes out. Although it comes out of the urethra, it's not just urine alone. A woman can empty her bladder before sex and still experience some squirting as she gets sexually aroused. Scientific research indicates that the liquid that is released when a woman squirts is a mixture of prostatic secretions and a little bit of urine. It's a clear liquid that originates from her Skene's gland, or the quote-unquote female prostate, because when you're a fetus in the womb, parts of your body that grow to develop into like a vulva or into a penis have the same original pieces. So what turns into the prostate for the man, they think turns into the Skene's gland for the female. So can all women squirt? It's hard to say for sure what percentage of women experience squirting from sexual activity because, it's kind of hard to do a comprehensive study on that. You can imagine how intrusive that kind of study would be. One small study by the International Society of Sexual Medicine reports that 10 to 50% of women, now that's quite a range, have ejaculated during sexual activity, but most aren't aware of it because the fluid often flows backwards into the bladder instead of outside of the body. The amount of fluid ejaculated differs from woman to woman also, ranging from a little trickle to gushing like a half cup's worth. Squirting is often seen in porn where it's exaggerated or faked, as producers of pornography tend to be drawn to extremes and distort real sexual experiences and cause people to think that if I don't perform like the way I saw in this, made up film of a woman ejaculating, then I probably am not squirting. So your experience is going to be your experience, and it's not like you're doing it wrong if it's not comparing to some other woman's experience. But first, what's so great about squirting? Squirting has an incredible feeling of release. Prolonged sexual arousal builds up fluid produced by the Skene's gland, and it is really pleasurable to let it all out. Some people wonder if a squirting is connected to orgasm or if the orgasm causes a squirting. And although those two things can happen at the same time, they really aren't the same process. Now, a woman can squirt as a result of feeling that pressure build up and feel really good, but doesn't mean she's had an orgasm. Where your uterus contracts a little bit, you have that overwhelming feeling of that rush of sexual release is usually independent of the squirting experience. And just because you squirted doesn't mean you're done. It means you can also have an orgasm too. What's also really fun about this is the vulnerability of really letting go can create a very intimate experience for the couple. For many, it represents not holding anything back and fully giving in to the pleasure of the moment and of the passion in the moment. This can be a special moment between you and your spouse and can be really enjoyable. If you're ready to give this a try, let's talk about how to plan ahead for this experience. You need to know that squirting can get really messy, but as some women profess, it's so worth it. Those who've squirted before might worry about the mess they'll make or wonder if their spouse will think it's gross or dirty. Another concern women might have is how it feels. When women are about to squirt, they feel a buildup of pressure, or in other words, almost squirting feels like almost peeing. Also, after you squirt, it's going to be really wet around your body, and continuing to have sex in a really wet spot isn't that fun. So, some planning ahead can really help. Female ejaculation fluid is very thin and watery, and it's not like semen or vaginal lubricant. In other words, it will seep through a towel. So, if you have a waterproof throw, or disposable chuck pads, or like a rubber crib mat, or if you have towels, just use a lot of towels under you. Some people even have sex blankets just for this. Having something underneath you will protect your bedding and furniture from the fluids. And protecting your bedding or furniture from your fluids can also ease the anxiety and allow you to just relax and enjoy the experience entirely. Another way to plan for the fluid is to have your husband sexually stimulate you while you're sitting in a chair over like a tile floor or some sort of a surface where it's really easy to mop up afterwards. That way you're free to gush onto the floor at the height of your passion, and you can have a towel handy to just easily mop things up afterwards. Embracing the mess, by the way, and welcoming the wetness is part of the sexual experience. Sharing a liberating and vulnerable experience like this can be really intimate. And couples that associate intimacy and its goodness with squirting make this a wonderful part of their marriage. And besides, isn't life, marriage, and sex sometimes a little bit messy anyway? All right, now that you've got your area set up, and before we dive into specific techniques, it's important to keep in mind that great sex is so much more than just mastering a skill or following a recipe or focusing on technique alone. Couples can have sex that isn't really erotic. It's adding the element of eroticism. In other words, bringing your heart and your mind to it that makes it great. Like I like to say, you make love with your heart and mind, not just your genitals. There are a few techniques that are more likely to make you squirt, but every woman is different. So there isn't like this magic method or routine that will make you gush every time. The techniques I'll talk about in a moment are designed to produce a feeling of tension and buildup, similar to the pressure on your bladder that's going to give you an urge to pee. The first thing to remember, though, is not to rush the process. It takes a while to build up the tension that will be released as a squirt. It can't be rushed. So take the time to flirt and think sexy thoughts about your spouse throughout the day. Dance and make out in the kitchen. Enjoy lots of foreplay. Do what you like to do to set the mood, such as, I don't know, turning down the lights, lighting some candles, playing some music. The goal is for both of you to get comfortable, relaxed, and very turned on. The type of stimulation that leads to squirting is usually faster movements with pressure. So you don't want to rush through foreplay or it's not going to feel really good. You have to be sufficiently aroused in order for these movements to feel good so that the buildup doesn't feel like pressure. Remember, if she isn't sufficiently aroused, the buildup to gushing often doesn't feel pleasurable at all. Whenever you get close to squirting, it'll feel like you need to pee. Instead of holding it in, relax through it and just let it go. Bear down instead of contracting and pulling back and holding back. Gushes usually come a lot easier after your first one. The techniques I'm going to outline here are about stimulating your wife to add pressure on her bladder to give her like a sense of urgency of needing to pee, but we're going to do that from inside the vagina. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this, so give them all a try and then see what works well for the two of you. All right, so we've talked about setting up the environment, setting the mood, remembering there's lots of foreplay and eroticism and fun and excitement and love and passion. And now you're ready to move in this direction. Here's a few sex positions that might help. So what you want are sex positions that have consistent G-spot stimulation. Those are the ones usually more likely to make her gush or ejaculate. The easiest way to stimulate the Skene's gland is by putting pressure on the front or top of the vaginal wall, the side of your belly button from inside, a few inches in. You might be familiar with this spot and enjoy G-spot stimulation already. Anyway, husbands can use shallow, fast, different types of strokes. What you want to do is keep pressure on the vagina's upper wall. So one sex position is where the wife lays down on her back on a sofa or an armchair with her bottom up on the armrest. It kind of elevates her body, her bottom a little more. And her husband standing by the side of the armrest can enter her. That's really good for G-spot stimulation. Another one is on the bed. You can position a lot of pillows under her bottom to kind of raise her up a bit. And then the husband can enter her as he's kneeling, and that puts pressure on her G-spot. And the third one's a classic. People call it doggy style. I prefer to call it stallion style. But this is when the wife gets on all fours and her husband enters in from behind. And she can adjust her hips and the angle by rotating her pelvis to have the type of stimulation on her G-spot that feels good to her. Building up the arousal and stimulation necessary for squirting is going to take a bit of time. And if she can gush just from intercourse alone, great. But the reality is most couples don't really ejaculate that way. She needs more direct stimulation and a little more finesse on the G-spot area. So you can use your hands. So here are some ideas on how you can use your hands to stimulate your wife. The first is called the bang-bang stimulation method, where you use two fingers and in firm, steady, fast tapping motions, you're going to stimulate the G-spot. Kind of like a come hither type of a motion with your fingers, but it's a little bit firm and steady, and it's like a fast tapping motion upwards towards her bladder. So work with your wife, make sure she knows what feels comfortable for her. And this might feel really good if you can pair it with some clitoral stimulation, like using your other hand or a vibrator or your tongue, some way to give a lot of sexual stimulation to that area. Another idea to consider is to use some sex toys that are designed to stimulate the G-spot. You can use like a curved dildo or a G-spot stimulator that are used to stimulate her G-spot by inserting it a few inches into her vagina and then pressing it firmly against the top wall of her vagina near her G-spot while making quick in and out or up and down motions like that. Now, you may need to remember to pull out the toy right as she ejaculates, so communication is really essential. The key here is get in a comfortable position where you can commit to certain motions for several minutes, maybe 10 minutes or more. Keeping your wrist straight will help with strain on your fingers, and just find a way you can relax. And remember, eye contact, and get in a position where you can really enjoy each other's presence. Now that we've talked about setting up the environment, remembering lots of foreplay and a lot of eroticism, we've talked about different sex positions, both for intercourse positions and for using your hands. Now let's talk about the 3 stages that lead up to squirting. There's going to be a warm-up, a build-up, and a release stage. It's like going on a roller coaster ride. The warm-up is like anticipation of the fun ahead. Think of it as like driving to the theme park or walking up to the roller coaster. Build-up is when you're seated on the ride and that bar comes down over to keep you in, and you begin the slow journey up the long, tall hill. And release is when you go over the top of that first hump and you begin the descent of your roller coaster. So let's talk about these in more detail. Once you've found a technique that generates stimulation on the G-spot and has you feeling that kind of unique tension of like a buildup of needing to pee, you're going to work with that. You're going to start by spending some time that you normally do during sexual activity, including foreplay. And you're going to transition to touching and stimulating the G-spot area of her vagina by slowly building up the intensity. You're going to go slow and take your time, and there's no need to rush. After that is time for buildup. And this is when you know that there's enough stimulation and things are starting to feel really good. This is when you're going to increase the pressure or speed or change the rhythm of the stimulation. The pressure being placed on her erogenous zones also needs to be more than usual. And so the speed and movement needs to be faster than usual too. And don't forget her other erogenous zones too. It's really important to make love to all of her, not just one specific part of her, as long as it's not distracting. Anyway, she'll start to feel an increase of tension building up within her, and sometimes it takes several minutes of consistent stimulation in order to build enough tension. So, patience and getting in a comfortable position are going to be essential. So, keeping things steady and repeating that motion over and over again is essential in the build-up phase. All right, ladies, once the tension and pressure inside you is building and it feels like you're about to burst, you're going to want to use some of these techniques to trigger the squirt. The first is to unclench your muscles. You normally clench your internal pelvic muscles like you're trying to hold in pressure or like you're trying to hold in urine. And that tension buildup is going to increase more and more throughout the stimulation. So when you want to release or you can't keep it in anymore, you're going to intentionally relax your muscles and just release the floodgates. Another technique is called turbo mode. And after the tension is built up to what feels like your limit, you're going to ask your husband to increase the speed and pressure from manual stimulation or whatever you're using to just really bring you over the edge. The third is just to stay consistent. And just staying super consistent with the same amount of pressure, rhythm, speed, and the type of motion is enough for some women to ejaculate once they've built up enough tension. The fourth technique is to just bear down. And some wives say they gush when they bear down, kind of like you're pushing out a baby. And the last technique is to withdraw. Once you feel a lot of tension and you feel like you're ready to open the dam, pull out his hand or the toy or whatever you're using, and pulling out whatever that's in her vagina tends to open the floodgates and cause her to release the squirt. Remember that the amount of fluid coming out will vary. Some women just squirt a few drops, and others will gush like a half a cup of fluid. Some women just dribble, while others squirt a pretty strong stream. Let's talk about a few tips for husbands. Now, one thing that's really important is you don't make your wife a project. No one likes being a project. And if you make making her ejaculate means something about your sexual prowess. It's going to affect your performance and interfere with intimacy. So remember, you're here to enjoy your wife in a new light. You're here to experience something with her. It's not about making her do something, or if she doesn't perform in some way, it's not a reflection of her or you. So your frame of mind approaching this is going to matter tremendously on how this affects your relationship on the bigger scale. So pay attention to that. The second thing is your reaction matters. How you react when she squirts will most likely determine how she's going to feel about it next time. So if the sight of her ejaculation turns you on, she'll most likely get turned on too. Or if you make a face or you grimace or get grossed out by her squirting, then she'll probably be less enthusiastic about this natural response to her sexual arousal. The last tip I have for husbands is patience. The process of helping her relax, building up the tension, and release usually means long, continuous stimulation sessions. Your wife may feel like she's taking too long, or that you're getting tired or bored or not having any fun. Make it clear to her that she's not taking too long, that there's no time limit, and you can enjoy being with her regardless of how long it takes, because this time with her is so fun, just enjoying this with her. And it doesn't matter if she squirts or not, so don't give her that pressure either. I'm grateful that God has created our bodies in such amazing ways, and there's so much depth to our capacity for sexual expression. I think this method of squirting is just one more manifestation of how amazing sex can be, especially in marriage where you're together for the long haul, and can bring a couple closer together when they make intimacy in their marriage a priority. Thank you for listening today. If this has been helpful, download the Intimately Us app if you haven't yet. Also, check out our challenge that's going on right now. And if you'd like to work with me in my Next Level program, check it out on my website at getyourmarriageon.com. See you next week.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.